The annual Pittsburgh Pro is all wrapped up, and of course we had some top guest posers at this event like we do every year. This year's guest posers included Big Ramy, Samson Data, Hunter Labrada, Clarita, Nick Walker, and Derek Lunsford. This video is just to give you a quick recap and analysis of what everyone looked like at this guest posing. Let's start off with Nick Walker. Now, we already had a good idea of what Nick was going to look like. He's a guy that's very, very transparent with his updates. He'll post multiple times a week and usually sometimes full updates, maybe weekly, bi-weekly. He'll post every single mandatory on his Instagram page, so we already had a very good idea of what his physique was looking like before he even got to Pittsburgh. But looking at his physique here, I've noticed that his waist looks better and better. Better than his guest posing last year that he did in Pittsburgh. He has more control over it, and it's just much tighter in general. He had a lot more lat flare from the front, which definitely helped his V-taper, makes his waist look a lot smaller. Now, his quad sweeps, his other thing that he needs to improve, I don't think they're improving that quickly, but that's okay. Nick knows what he needs to do. He knows about this problem. Talked about it. He's talked about how he's overhauling his leg training, eating a bit more on leg days, doing full range of motion, all that kind of good stuff. He knows what he needs to do, and I'm sure he's going to do it. And this is just the start of Nick's offseason. The Arnold was 2 months ago, and that was his last show, so honestly, this is a pretty good offseason physique for Nick Walker. Now, Clarita was an interesting name being added to this list. Sean is a 212 guy, and all these other guys are open guys. Not only is Sean a 212 guy, but he's 5'2". But looking at him here, he was probably over or just around 200 pounds at that point, which is absolutely crazy on a 5'2" frame. Now, Sean is usually one of those guys that thrives when he's actually conditioned after a prep on show day. He's one of those guys that really pushes the crazy detail with the conditioning, and that's how he looks a lot better. You know, being a shorter guy, he's not taking up as much space as these other guys. He's going to thrive off when he's actually lean. But here, I was hella impressed. I mean, I don't think you can fit any more mass on his frame, but somehow he keeps going. Looking at this, I think the 212 guys are going to have a hard time taking him out in years to come. Now let's go to what I think is the biggest letdown of the show, Big Ramy. And let me preface that this mattered a lot for him, I feel. So he fell hard at the Olympia. He had a fuck ton of issues, fell to 5th place. He came back at the Arnold, still had some issues, but he was a lot better than at the Olympia, but he still didn't do that well in terms of placings, but at least he looked better. On top of all of that, he did skip this guest posing last minute last year. So in most people's minds, this needed to be at least a somewhat decent showing for him, and he kind of had to do it after being booked again. He couldn't do another skip where he didn't show up. He needed to really honor his commitment this time. He did honor his commitment, however, when he showed up, there were still a lot of issues. I thought that being in the off-season, that should cover up a lot of his issues, you know, with a little extra off-season fluff, because a lot of his issues, you know, can be covered up with a little bit of extra body fat and water, and it can kind of mask some of these issues that were exposed when he was in that shredded conditioning. However, that was not really the case for most of them. The first thing I noticed was his waist. It is a mile wide. His abs, although they're still better than at the Olympia, where he was definitely kind of washed out there. But his waist, it was thicker than Nick Walker's. And like if you want to do a pound for pound comparison, because Nick Walker's shorter, it was, you know, thicker than Nick Walker's by a country mile. The next thing I noticed were the quads, lumpy and blurry. Not to mention, I think the dents are back. Now, getting to the blurry part, I kind of noticed this at the Arnold. Some shots, if you were to look at them, when he was kind of having his quads half flexed, maybe a little bit relaxed, you can see like the lines were blurred. And I don't want to say it looks like oil, but when this happens so many times, it definitely does look like oil that he's injected to try to make up some of these dents, fill in those dents, and the oil is just kind of settled in a weirder way, and they can blur the lines. And this is an issue that the off-season fluff really isn't going to help at all. In fact, it makes it look a whole lot worse when you kind of have this weird blurriness because of maybe site enhancement oil, and then you add water and extra body fat on there. What do you think happens? It looks even worse. Another thing I noticed are the triceps, and really, they're just gone. The side tricep, he had to have known. Like, he held it for like 2 seconds. It was flat. You can tell that it's just gone for whatever reason. There's no nerve damage, whatever it is. There's no definition. It's just not there. The last problem I want to highlight are the shoulders. They were pointy as fuck. And the lack of triceps really exacerbates this problem, because when you have no triceps and your delts are inflamed with oil or just regular size, really, it doesn't even come down to oil. When you have no triceps, but your delts are regular size, or in this case, maybe a little bit inflamed, they're going to look even worse because you don't have that tricep to really balance that out. You're missing half your arm, so it makes the delt look even bigger and makes it stand out even more. We have to give Big Ramy some leeway though. He just came off of Ramadan, which if you don't know is a Muslim tradition where they don't eat during the day. So it's obviously not very intuitive for a bodybuilder to have Ramadan and eat, but he did just come out of Ramadan, so he couldn't eat like a bodybuilder, and he's also off gear apparently, or at least on a very dialed back dose. Along with that training, the training is also apparently dialed back. But honestly, I don't think it would have made that big of a difference. I think Big Ramy's issues are here to stay, unfortunately. Whether he retires or not, that's not really up for me to say, but I do think he's going to be dealing with these issues for the rest of his career. At minimum, it's going to be a hard thing to overcome. Each one of these issues are definitely an interesting thing to tackle and not an easy thing to tackle. So we're going to have to wait and see what Big Ramy looks like next and what he continues to do with his career from here on out. Next, we had Hunter Labrada. I noticed pretty much everywhere in his physique was at least somewhere improved, except that stomach looked still a little bit washed out, but he switched his diet around, so we'll have to see. That's probably one of those things that we'll have to wait and see on show day when he does Tampa and Texas, until we actually get to see if he's made improvements there. And also, I don't think he's made too many improvements in the back. So his two main issues, the weird stomach ab issue and then his back, haven't been improved, but I did notice improvement just about everywhere else. And he is one of the leanest besides Derek Lunsford on the stage because, like I said, he'll be doing Tampa and Texas. And if you guys don't already know, those shows are 13 and 15 weeks out, something like that. So he's definitely at the beginning of prep. Hunter said he wasn't trying to make massive improvements this year on the scale or really anywhere. He was just trying to make small improvements where he needed. And we'll have to wait and see on show day, I feel, to get a true test. But honestly, there's not too much to report on here. It's simply just Hunter looking slightly better than he did last year. But next is someone who definitely improves all the time. It's Samson Data. Now, Samson is 2 months post-Arnold, and he's already well over 320 pounds. Now, I've been kind of getting used to Samson Data. He's been doing some guest postings. He's been hitting the road recently after he's Arnold Classic champion. He's really trying to be a good ambassador for the sport, and he's really doing that. So he's been hitting the road, doing some guest postings. And, you kind of, when you look at these guys so much, you kind of get used to it, right? You get as used to it as you can seeing a 6 foot, 300 plus pound human. If you watch bodybuilding a lot, you know what I mean. This obviously is a great feat of just human endeavor, but you do kind of get used to it. But then I considered he is off everything. In a previous update, he said he is 313 pounds. He's 320 some now. He was cleaning out his system, probably TRT at most, and is really taking it easy on food and training. And coupled with all that, he's been traveling a lot. He's been hitting the road, like I said. So consider all of that, off drugs, toning back everything, and he looks like this and is effortlessly at 320 plus pounds. That's what makes it impressive. Let's end off on a high note. Let's end off with the guy who stole the show last year, Rye Subs. Actually, just kidding. Rye Subs was not there, the Pittsburgh Pro, this year or last. In fact, they weren't there either year. In fact, they're not even a person. But I will tell you where they are at. They are at the top of the supplement game in terms of formulas and especially in terms of flavors. They have a ton of authentic flavor collabs. Kool-Aid flavor pre-workout, Ring Pop flavor pre-workout, Sunny D flavor pre-workout. They also have great flavor collabs in protein, Moon Pie flavor, Jet Puff marshmallow flavored protein, and soon Skippy peanut butter flavored protein coming very, very soon. Head over to RyeSubs.com and shop all of the authentic flavor collabs and use code DHudson5510 to get 10% off your entire order. That's code DHudson5510 off every single thing at RyeSubs.com. But actually, we are ending today's video with Derek Lunsford, who has stolen the show 2 years in a row now. What's crazy is he can add size and keep those lines, right? He was pulling a vacuum and he improved his legs. He had the best X-frame on that stage by far. Even better than Samson. Samson has a very good X-frame, very good quad sweep, but with the sheer non-existence of Derek Lunsford's waist, it gives him a crazy X-frame. He was just as lean as last year when I went back and looked at the last Pittsburgh Pro guest posing. He may have been leaner in certain areas and may have been leaner in certain areas here or there. You know, they may have traded some level of leanness. But what I noticed here, he was just a lot bigger. He doesn't have to worry about going back to 212. He doesn't have to worry about any kind of doubts that he may return to the 212. He's full steam ahead in the open, and that showed on stage. You know, he hasn't been improving everything, and he was full blown. The main thing he needed to improve were his legs, and by the looks of it, he's keeping that size, right? His legs always get big in the offseason. I think his problem is he needs to keep the size, and not having to return to the 212 weight cap will really help him as long as he can just keep that size on for long. And he's definitely built the size yet again. His legs are bigger than they've ever been, and they're really separated. Like I said, he's pretty lean here, and the quads were absolutely separated and diced. Honestly, I think he was the leanest at the show, including Hunter, who just started a prep. Now, they may have been very close, and I think maybe they can go back and forth on a couple body parts, but Derek Lunsford being just as lean, if not slightly leaner than Hunter, really does say something, and he's able to improve at the same time. Overall, Derek is improving and keeping that condition. It's amazing what he can do. He's doing every single thing right, and I really expect him to push Hadi Choopan at this year's Mr. Olympia. Overall, I think this guest posing was even better than last year's. We had a couple more athletes, and they were all on point this time. Even though I gave Big Ramy a little bit of shit, it was nice to see him show up at least. Really, the only other big name we were missing was, of course, Hadi Choopan, the reigning Mr. Olympia. However, I'm going to give him a little bit more leeway than I did Big Ramy last year, simply because Hadi is from Iran. And if you don't know, Iran is the absolute bottom tier in terms of getting visas to come over here to the US. I'm sure Hadi didn't even want to mess with it. He probably didn't want to push his luck so he can get that visa for the Olympia, and I'm sure he would have wanted to do it if he could have. I think Samson and Derek really stole the show this time around. Derek stole the show last year, and he looked even better this year. And Samson, he's just a monster. And I think those two guys will be the main two to push Hadi Choopan at this year's Mr. Olympia. That's going to do it for me today. Don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section about how you thought the Pittsburgh Pro guest posing went down. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Project Bodybuilding if you haven't already. And go ahead and visit RyeSubs.com for all your supplement needs. Use code DHudson5510 to save yourself 10% off as well. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys for watching.